So, uh, allow me to present this work of CEDS UNPA together with Alive and Thrive. So, this presentation is more of a highlight of what we've done since around 6 years, and it's primarily focused on breastfeeding, the economic impact of breastfeeding, and what can we do, yeah, to overcome the problem. Now, when I first um, stepped into this topic, I was really I don't really know much about breastfeeding, but then I see that there's quite a lot of issues regarding breastfeeding, and most of them are concerned with socioeconomic issues, and not only on the medical issues. Medical issues is pretty much, we already have the procedure on hand. The socio-economic issues, that's a completely different story. Yeah. So these series of studies basically touch upon those, but I believe we are only at the surface, yeah, because we still have a lot of topics and things to do regarding this part. Um, so well, this is a bit of disclaimer. So we don't receive funding from BMS companies, and so these are the series of our studies. So thus far, we move from the cost of not breastfeeding itself, and then we move into these two are the cost of not breastfeeding, and these are the financial need to provide paid maternity leave in formal sector and informal sector, and this is basically just a method paper. And we have one more coming up, and this is more on the social, economic, and health issues regarding mental illness factors. And we have one more coming. This is more analysis at the company level, but there's still a long way to go. So this is our studies thus far. A bit of background. So less than half of children under 6 months in Indonesia receive exclusive breastfeeding. Yeah. So although this rate is in line with global nutrition target, but it also shows that we still have a lot to do. Yeah, because well, 50%. So we still have another 50% of children basically needs to receive exclusive breastfeeding. So there's still a long way to go. Yeah. Now, the first part that we did is the cost of not breastfeeding. So Live and Thrive has these tools of, it's like a global costing tools for cost of not breastfeeding. So if you look at this graph, we see that Indonesia has the largest impact in terms of cost of not breastfeeding. This is understandable, because the number of population in Indonesia is just huge, right? So that's the main cause of the high economic impact of not breastfeeding. In terms of rate, Indonesia is actually comparable with the other countries, and in some cases even better. But because of our number of our population, then yeah, the economic impact is the highest. So what we did back then was basically we tried to calculate the number of infants um, as a proxy for those, needing breastfeeding. And then actually, my friend used a formula called population attributable risk to calculate the number of diarrhea cases and pneumonia or respiratory disease caused by not breastfeeding. Yeah, so these numbers here, you see the number of diarrhea and the PRD. PRD is the pneumonia and respiratory disease. This is the ones being that were caused by not breastfeeding. And from here, we determine how many of them are looking for treatment, and yeah, and understandably, not all of them are looking for treatment. So based on those, then basically we have these numbers. So the cost per case is 200,000 rupiah per case, so it's $15 per case. But if we separate both, I think the amount of cost to treat pneumonia and respiratory disease is a bit higher, yeah. But if we make average cost, then it's 200,000 rupiah per case. Now the total annual cost reach 1.6 trillion rupiah, or 100 something million US dollars. And this is from social perspective, yeah. 80% of this comes from direct treatment. And so if you look the number here, 1.2 trillion rupiah comes from the health costs, health system cost, whereas the rest came from the non-healthcare costs. So this is like the indirect costs where patients have to accompany their children, they miss their work, they need to spend money on transport, food, etc. Yeah. And here we try to pinpoint in some provinces where we took our data. So we see it's a bit similar with between Indonesia and other countries in ASEAN, and West Java compared to the other provinces will have the highest amount of economic impact. Understandably, of course, because the number of population is just the highest. Yeah. So this is just the highlight of what it looks like in different provinces. So unfortunately, we don't have data for all provinces. The rest of the provinces are proxied based on these numbers. Well, yeah, who knows? Yeah, maybe in the future we will have a more complete data for all provinces. So the message is basically, the 1.6 trillion rupiah, this can be easily avoided if we breastfeed. Yeah, so if we don't breastfeed, then this cost will be there in every year. So, but don't forget, I mean, if you have time to look into a bit more detail into these studies, there are also there are also higher costs, yeah, especially the cognitive loss, and this is quite something, yeah. So the yearly cost due to cognitive loss is 18 trillion rupiah. So sorry, it's around 1.3 billion US dollars, and it stems from productivity loss. So basically, it's when you have lower cognitive loss, then you have lower productivity. That's the assumptions, yeah. And the amount of that lower productivity economically is this much, yeah. And this is per year loss. Now, there's also a new estimate, yeah. So what we came at back then is 19 trillion. So this is the 18 trillion plus the 1.6 trillion. But there's also new estimate from Life and Thrive that the cost may reach even much higher. Yeah, and this is because they put in some health issues, other health issues related to not breastfeeding, such as diabetes, etc. Yeah, so the cost is staggering. Yeah, but costs, well, there are costs, yeah, but things that we need to pay more attention to is these, basically, right? These numbers. We potentially avoid more than 5,000 infant death, 2,000 maternal death due to breastfeeding, breast cancer, and 15 million respiratory disease cases. So we potentially avoid these if we breastfeed. So, yeah, so I think more than the economic impact, I mean, these numbers should speak much louder. Yeah. So so then we conduct a bit of survey in those areas that I mentioned. So what are the top four, yeah, challenges of breastfeeding? So these four came quite often. Yeah. First is a strong formula milk market, lack of lactation rooms, and local customs potentially hinder the success of adequate breastfeeding. Now, this is very interesting. Number three is because this happened not with not with the bad intention in mind. Yeah, I mean these people they think what they did is for the best. Yeah, because they just don't know the complete information. Yeah, for instance, in some areas they think that exclusive breastfeeding is not enough. Yeah, therefore they should add some more food. But then that should be the case, right? I mean, the moment you add more food, then it's not exclusive breastfeeding anymore. So, but it's not because they would like to, it's not like they have bad intention. Yeah? They have all the good intention, but it's just the way they express their intention. Yeah? They need more information for it. Now, lack of lactation room is also interesting, because in some areas they also do not it's not approved. Yeah, they don't support like a lactation room because it's too costly. What they did is they provide more flexible working hours. Mothers can just go home and breastfeed their children, or mothers can take, various breaks to express breast milk. So these steps are something that some companies actually apply. So not just lactation room. So and also this is a bit concerning. Yeah, mothers' concern of reduced income. This also occur in a lot of areas actually. So when we ask, so what do you think about having longer maternity leave, paid maternity leave? Yeah, instead of 3 months like we have right now, how about 6 months? What do you think? So some of them agree, but some of them said, well, I would like to go back to work as soon as I can because then I need the income. Yeah. So if we are faced by that kind of issues, then it's a bit hard, yeah, to design, a policy that's really telling mothers to provide breastfeeding, whereas at the same time they also face this kind of social issues, and in the end they have to make a trade-off, right, between breastfeed their children or reducing income to the family. So it's kind of complicated issue. So what can we do? So in our analysis, we have only been able to pinpoint two type of uh, policies. First is the lactation room. So we calculate how much do we need to provide lactation room, and the other one is how much do we need to provide paid maternity leave to working mothers in informal sector and formal sector. Yeah. Now, so in calculating this cost, we have two methods. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what kind of data that you have. The first method, method A, is basically the method that we developed, and this is more using macro level data. I mean, because you don't have this kind of micro data because it's not available for everyone, but macro is more freely available, such as the World Bank data. So method A is basically trying to utilize this. Yeah. Method B, on the other hand, if you have microdata, then you can make this kind of analysis. Yeah, you can really pinpoint, for this kind of group of working mothers, how much does it cost, yeah, to support them, and for the other kind of group of working mothers informally, what kind of what kind of support that you can provide for them, and how much do you need for it. Yeah, so method B can be really specific. Method A can be a bit general, but then you have more freedom with obtaining data. So I will not go into detail into both methods, but you can ask me during the discussion or contact me later. I will be happy to discuss with you. So let us look the results. So first, for the lactation room is a bit easy. I mean, we just estimate the number, of companies. Here in our scenarios, we estimate 80% of large companies. Then how much do we need? So this is the amount of rupiah or dollars that we need to provide lactation room at this point to this many of companies. So you have this basic, advanced, and comprehensive is basically the type of room. So basic is just basically a clean room with refrigerator and probably air conditioner, and that's it. Yeah. But the more advanced and the more facility that you get. Yeah. What we hope is just the basic room would suffice, I think. Yeah, I mean, advanced and comprehensive is more like a lactation room that you will find in malls. Yeah, but in office, I think I would be very happy if we have the basic lactation room already. Now, this is the comparison between financial need, paid maternity leave in formal and informal sector. Yeah, so in this part, we use method B for both sectors. Basically, what we find is for formal sectors, we need 5.1 trillion rupiah per year, yeah, to provide paid maternity leave for working mothers. And informal sector is a bit higher because there are more women working there, as you can see from this percentage. But the scenario that we look here is very aggressive. Yeah, it's 100 coverage. So all mothers who work in formal and informal sector will receive paid maternity leave, which is not the case. If you look at the ILO report, even in the formal sectors, I think they estimate around 32% of those working in formal sector actually receive paid maternity leave. So This is a very aggressive and optimistic scenario. But then you get the full picture of the cost needed, yeah, the financial needed. Now, the important message is here, yeah. So we need 14.1 trillion rupiah per year. And if you remember the cost, which I will show again in the next slide, this is still lower than the cost of not breastfeeding, yeah. Which is this, right? If you still remember the number, so this is your social cost of not breastfeeding. Of course, people can argue, well, cognitive loss is, we cannot really see it, right? I mean, the company cannot really see it. So do we really need to include that cost? Of course, we should, yeah, because whether, even if we cannot see it, but it potentially happens, right, due to the effect, the positive effect of breastfeeding. So what we need to ponder is this cost here, the 14.1 trillion per year, is much lower than this. Yeah. Even if you like to extend the length of breastfeeding into 6 months, basically you just times this number by 2. Yeah, it's 28.2 trillion rupiah per year. So it's still lower than this. Yeah, still lower than this, especially if you include those other diseases. So yeah, these costs stem from illness, death as a monetary and social cost, and these are the numbers that I mentioned previously. And remember, our studies have not included other potential chronic diseases such as stunting, cardiovascular disease, mental illness, etc. So there's quite a lot. Huh? There's quite a lot of diseases that stem from not breastfeeding. Although stunting is not a direct effect, but stunting can be an effect of not breastfeeding. So in terms of World Breastfeeding Week in 2020, this is like an additional message. So actually, the mission to promote breastfeeding is in line with this statement, and it is in line with SDG's target. So basically, supporting breastfeeding can reduce formula milk consumption, number of births, carbon emission, etc. So it's in line with reducing emission. But of course, breastfeeding needs support from government, mothers and their family, and all stakeholders. I mean, government, well, that's obvious, but mothers and family, this is another story. Yeah? I mean, usually the burden only apply to mothers, but not the family. Yeah, but in our study, we found the family has a very important role in the success of breastfeeding, especially a husband. Yeah, because sometimes family has a good intention, but the way they pressure the mothers, it can be, the effect can be negative. Yeah, and then the mother just stop breastfeeding altogether. So, in the end, you need support from all stakeholders and the family. So this is our next agenda. The share of financing need or investment by the company. So how much do they really need to support the program? We calculate the amount of cost nationally, cognitive loss, etc. But the company may ask, so what do we need? Yeah, what is the exact financial needs that we need to support this? Yeah, because company can be, they will be more pragmatic. Yeah. And then who pays for what? Yeah, we have the simulation. We know how much do we need to support paid maternity leave at formal, informal sectors. But then who pays for it? Yeah, who pays for what? Central level, provincial level, city or district level. That's a totally different question. And then these are the next agenda as well, connecting maternity leave with female labor force participation rate. Some studies show that better maternity leave policy will lead to better female labor force participation rate because they just willing to work, yeah, because they know they are being protected. And then are there differences between different socioeconomic groups? And this is very interesting because in some parts the concern about breastfeeding can be very different. Yeah, I show you some of the more common concerns, but in other parts the concern it can also a bit, it's totally different than the concern of income. In more lower socioeconomic groups, income will be primary consideration, but the higher level it can be totally different. And then of course COVID. Yeah, I have some share from my friends, doctors. They said, well, during COVID-19, exclusive breastfeeding rate is just going down. Yeah, I mean, we are still working on how to really pinpoint this, but some of the presentation already shown such trend. Yeah, so due COVID-19, the rate of exclusive breastfeeding is just falling down. So And then we also look at the misalignment with WHO recommendation for breastfeeding and newborn care, yeah, because a lot of posyandu's are closed, etc. So we have a lot of homework ahead of us due to this COVID-19. Okay, so these are the list of studies. You can look at them later on. This is just our acknowledgement to our partners, and that will be all. Thank you for listening, and Pak Dewa, I return to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Interesting with lots of numbers, intriguing numbers related to the breastfeeding. And now I would like to open for comment or suggest questions, yeah, related to the presentation. One moment, how to, okay, use this. Please raise your hand or you may chat. From Mbak Maria Gayatri, yeah, BKKBN, you raise your hand. Please, the floor is yours to ask questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Bapak Moderator, for the opportunity. That's a good presentation, Pak. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I also interested about the maternity leave. In your presentation that you say about the maternity leave is about 6 months. So what will you do to make this issue as the national policy? Because if we want to increase the maternity leave become 6 months, I think it will be improved significantly for the exclusive breastfeeding. And then it will automatically reduce the rate of stunting in Indonesia. So what will you do to make it as a national policy? And is it possible to improve the maternity leave become 6 months in Indonesia? Thank you, Pak.
Okay. Pak Dewa, shall I answer directly or?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Bu Maria, thank you for the question. This this is a $1 million question. Yeah, so what's next, right? So we have all of these results and so what? Yeah, so yeah, that's currently something that we're working on. I mean, like I mentioned, we need the collaboration from all stakeholders, right? But the problem is our current stakeholders is still within the same circle, yeah? Like Ministry of Health, Ministry of Women Empowerment. So these people already know what to do, right? I mean, they know the importance of breastfeeding, etc. So what we need now is really step out and really collaborate with Ministry of Manpower, let's say, because then that's really where the policy will take place, right? In terms of maternity leave. So right now is we are preparing as many ammunition as possible. Like how much do we need? Yeah, but then how much do we need is still not enough, right? We still need to know who pays for what. Yeah, and then if we have that ammunition, but we still need the ammunition to convince companies as well, right? So well, this is what you need in terms of financial need, but then you have benefits as well, right? Like in some studies, they said if maternity leave are better, then women have less time to take care of their children, and because their children are being more healthy, basically, right? So this kind of stuff we need to really put into paper and to convince the companies. Yeah, once the companies are convinced, and then the other ministries are convinced, then we should be able to move forward into that kind of length of maternity leave. I mean, 6 months is I think it's much better than the current 3 months. You know, the current 3 months, even not really 3 months, right? I mean, some people spend 2 months and they already go back to workplace, yeah, because yeah, they need more income, etc. It's really a complicated issue, but someone has to do it. Yeah? I mean, we have to do it. So together, I mean, all of stakeholders, we need to do it. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much for the questions, Mbak Maria, and the answer also, Mas Adiatma.
Yes.
I think we still have one more questions, just a short one if there are any more questions or comments for the presentation. Any other from the participants, colleagues? So if there is no other questions, I would like to thank Mas Adiat, Mas Siragaren team for the excellent presentation on the topic. Really interesting to know and to learn about these issues, yeah, the breastfeeding.
Thank you,
And
Kaiwan.
yes, and I would like to invite the big applause for the CEDES UNPAD team for the presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you. And now we move to the second presentation. I would like to call a team from Bapenas and Bank Indonesia, Mas Darendra and Mas Indra. Yeah. The title of the presentation is "The More, the Merrier, the Wealthier: The Multidimensional Taxonomy of Demography and Development in Indonesia." Mas Darendra, the room is yours.
Right. Thanks, Pak Dewa. Everyone, thanks for the opportunity. Basically, we would like to present our work. Allow me to share the screen. This is our work a couple of years back. Me and here, Mas Indra is also available. We basically would like to address the findings from the publication, SUPAS publication. It is also interesting to see whether the new census 2020 can give us the different results. But for the moment, we will present the findings from the SUPAS, the most recent publication we have. So the title first that the population, the demographic dividend, the productive age population will lead to the wealthier status or the increased status of socioeconomic welfare in a country. So that's why we would like to respond to see whether the findings, previous findings on SUPAS, which gives us the image of windows of opportunity, demographic dividend, really lead to the opportunity, the real opportunity or the welfare. So we would like to see the connection, if not the correlation of this demographic and development indicator. So as you may already know, you are familiar with the demographic indicators, you would see that the population increased significantly, the life expectancy is also increased, and most of the population live in urban areas. It seems that we can infer, albeit roughly, that people are getting wealthier, the productive age is increasing, and it leads to the potentials as has been published in many occasions, like IRSA 2017, and Butuning also published this book. And I think this is also a result or a corollary of the population control, the TFR reduction from 71, the decades of 70s, up to the most recent SUPAS. So yes, we identify primarily the varying rates of TFR between provinces that differ one from each other. And this will cause that not every provinces will gain the same momentum or the same change of age structure proportion. And it also indicates that some provinces will not gain what we call it the demographic dividend or a window of opportunity. And we think that eastern part of Indonesia, provinces in there still have TFR above 2.1, while the other provinces already achieve under 2 TFR and will experience relatively rapid transition. So this is basically the illustration which provinces will, so to speak, gain the demographic dividend and which are not. And several provinces, after they gain the demographic dividend, they will soon enter the period of aging population. But still, I think most of them will experience the the decrease of dependency ratio, which means that most of them will gain the demographic dividend. I think that the difference is on the scale. And this also implies that with this condition, it will need tailored or specific policies for each regions. Some, they need social protection, especially for aging, long-term care, while the others need the priorities on the employment creation, education, health, and so on and so forth. And this is from Bu Tuning's publications, her presentations from the latest SUPAS. So we have 4 clusters. First is provinces with late demographic transition. We have 5 provinces. Second, we have provinces with early demographic transition. We have 11. Third cluster, we have also 11 provinces which will enter pre-transition period. And 4 is the provinces with no transition. And this means with the varying rates of TFR, we can see that the peak year of the demographic dividend will also differ from provinces. And the index, the aging index, the dependency ratio will also differ. Basically, we would like to see whether this cluster still relevant. Sorry, I think I pressed. Anyone can still see the slides? Okay.
Yes.
So yes, thank you.
Yes.
Would like to check whether the cluster is still relevant if we would like to relate to see the connection with the development indicators. So first indication, we would like to check whether the size of family is correlated with the socioeconomic welfare. We see that the profile of poor family in Indonesia with and without children, it's difficult to tell whether poor family have more children. I think we can see it more clearly from the 90s until early 2000, but from 2005 till the latest data see different things. I think we cannot have like clear correlation whether the poor have more or less children. But our hunch is still with the demographic dividend, we see the opportunity of having productive age will lead to the better development indicators. Also, if we would like to check whether in urban and rural areas, I think there is also similar trend. But we can see that in rural groups, the wealthier percentiles tend to have smaller families. I'm sorry, in urban areas, it seems that the wealthier families tend to have smaller families, whilst the rural have larger families. So we use arbitrarily the demography indicators, the development indicators. We choose 3 from each dimensions, and we check the availability. It is also possible, I think, to have more than 6 indicators. I'm sorry, if I make it into slideshow, I think something is wrong. So allow me to stay in this mode. I will try to make it bigger, hopefully. Yes. So 6 variables. It's also possible to have more than 6. We can have like GDP, inflation rate, but we just would not like to have kitchen sink model. We just would like to minimize and to see whether these simple correlations between these 2 dimensions really clear. So we check the correlation. Some of them have significant correlation, some are not, but we would like to still use these variables for our exercise. We see using the techniques, the cluster analysis techniques, script plot and dendrogram, we think we can have 4 clusters. And yes, with ANOVA, with the methods available in cluster analysis, we are sure that we can have these 4 clusters, and we would like to check whether these 4 clusters have similar characteristics with Butonings from previous publications. It turned out that we have rather different composition from its clusters and different numbers. Apparently, we have only 4 provinces in the first cluster identified with low TFR, low dependency ratio, low unemployment, but high migration development indicators. Also, for the next 3 clusters, we have almost like 50% probably the similarities with the previous works of Butonings. So simply to compare between our works with Professor Tunings, we can only have 52.5%, but we can pull similarities between these 2 groupings. First, in Butonings number 1 cluster, late transition group, it is called provinces with below replacement rate and a large share of aging population. Seems that in our cluster we have this almost similar characteristic with provinces with lowest TFR, lowest dependency ratio, but also indicated by highest migration rate and unemployment rate. Whilst for the second group, the early transition group from Butoning, it has increasing share of productive age, but seemingly it will also enter the aging population. In our cluster, we have provinces with relatively lower poverty rates than the other clusters. So it seems that we can connect the dots, although it might not be really strong yet. The third group, we have a pre-transition group, provinces with stagnant, declining fertility rates, which will experience the demographic dividend later. In our cluster, we have provinces with highest dependency ratio, lowest migration rate, and highest unemployment rate. Seems it is difficult to connect this grouping in this third, but we can see somehow that the stagnant, the declining fertility rates somehow relate with the high dependency ratio. The fourth groups, we have uncertain transition. This could be the eastern provinces, but we have identified only 36 matching rate. It means that the provinces in the Butonings clusters with ours are different. But the high fertility rate will lead to the highest poverty rates and low human development indicators. So with our modest analysis, with this early analysis, we can see that only 52% similarities. There is an indication that if we would like to put more context, development context, economic context, monetary context, it will somehow broaden the comprehension on the existing findings on demographic structure. So people will look back from the statement that we will have demographic dividend. People will reflect whether this demographic dividend is quality enough, is good enough, is realized enough. So somehow we also see that the population control, the fertility seems to correlate with improving development indicators. Migration, interestingly, seems not really significant in this exercise. Issue of quality and quantity will lead to the specific policies at regional level. This is normative enough, but we can see at the moment that the distribution of DAK, the fund, regional fund, transfer fund, probably need to consider more this demographic development nexus. And last but not least, special attention needs to be given for the eastern part of Indonesia, the Indonesian provinces, with the high TFR, low development indicators, low socio-economic welfare status. I think that is from our presentation. We would be glad to have feedback, comments, and thanks for those who already filling out the polls. I created the polls several days ago, and seems that the result is in here. We can see the responses. I asked about the options, whether we should prioritize, utilize the demographic advantage, the demographic dividend, or we need to be careful, need to enhance the quality of the human resources first. Seems that most of them opts for the latter, and yeah, I think it's good to have your feedback. And thanks to you, Pak Dewa. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mas Darendra. Yeah, a nice presentation. And yeah, because it's the topic actually very close to our heart in Lembaga Demografi. Yeah? So we are very excited to see how far this result will go further. And I would like to open comment questions for Mas Darendra and team. If there are any questions, please raise your hand or just send us a chat. And I got a note from the panitia that we have a flexible time for questions and answers due to unfortunate event where one of the participant, the presenters, unable to present today. So yes, please, any comment, questions to Mas Darendra and team? While we wait, maybe I would like to just clarify it a little bit, Mas Darendra. Probably you can elaborate further. In the conclusion, you mentioned about the issues of quality and quantity that specifying on the policies at the regional level. Could you tell us a little bit more about what kind of quality versus quantity issues that we would like to see further, or is there any other room for improvement, particularly for the quality or the quantity that already done so far in this area of research? Please, Mas Darendra.
Yes, thanks, Pak Dewa. It's a really challenging question, but yeah, it's important, Pak, to have this because sometimes when we have these discourses, the narrative of demographic dividend, people will associate that it will automatically lend an advantage. So many policies are oriented towards the utilization of this productive age, this advantage, especially in the regions where they already enter the majority of the productive age. So the employment creation, vocational trainings, investment on this kind of employment-related policies are there, Pak. Well, actually, we can see that the quality is not really there yet. So we need to, I think we need to enhance a little bit this advantage, polish this advantage, give more advantage, another important advantage like education or additional skills, additional features that will help these potentials to be realized soon. So I think there are many findings in the same frequency, Pak. If we read the findings from the World Bank, the Pathway to Middle Class Jobs released last week, we can see that not all decent middle class jobs can be created, especially because two factors. First is because the economic structure does not really allow. We need to reform those, transform those economic structures. And the second, because the human capital is not ready yet. They are not ready for the jobs, the decent middle class jobs. It is a bit unfortunate because we have this increasing productive age, we have new investment law, new labor law, which allows big investment. But if we cannot enhance, so to speak, this productive segment, it will be filled, I think, with other manpowers, with other workers from overseas, or with the risk of automations. On top of that, we will see that it is urgent, I think, to prioritize quality, or to enhance this modality to become our real advantage. I think that is the illustration, Pak. So if we can identify the policies in each provinces with the productive age, with the increasing productive age segment, we can still see that there is still a gap. Although I think the investment on human resources is increasing, but I think it's not really sufficient yet. Thanks, Pak.
Okay, thank you, Mas Narendra. Mas Adiatma actually raised hand, would like to ask questions to Mas Narendra. Please, Mas Adiatma.
Thank you, Pak Dewa. Well, it's more like a comment. Yeah, Pak Narendra, I joined your poll, yeah. So you can already guess my answer, right? For the poll, yeah. But then, yeah, I think we need to collaborate on this, yeah. I mean, I think that one of the reasons why the quality is still not up there is maybe there's not enough breastfeeding when they were young. So yeah, but then I know it's a bit too late, yeah, because the bonus demography is already right in front of us. But I know, you know, maybe it's just something that we can work together, at least not for the sake of the bonus demography, but something in the future, because this problem will not go away, right? I mean, unless we do something right, then it just keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating, and we're going to save the same problem all over again, you know, with the following generations and so on. So yeah, that's just a bit on my end.
Yeah, thanks, Pak Adiatma, for the comment. Yeah, I agree. We have to break this cycle, this unfortunate vicious cycle. And yes, I agree, it's a bit too late. We already have this increasing productive age population. At the same time, we realize that the quality is not really standard. It is still substandard in average. So yes, that's why I decide to simplify the poll, only 2 options. If I make another option on we have to prioritize both, I think most of them will choose this option. So that's why I would like to see the impression or the opinions from audiences, whether they prefer the quantity or utilize this quantity for, even though for the low quality jobs, anything that can generate money, or prioritize the quality, although we have to be aware that the time is not in us. We have a really limited time. And yes, I think there is no instant policies to fix this. We have reskilling program, upskilling program, all that, but we haven't seen the impact yet. Probably we have to wait for the studies, the impact studies of Kartu Prakerja, PLK, vocational programs. We have to wait. But my hunch is, yeah, we can only rely on existing programs, just a bit enhanced, to see whether we can see the quick wins. For instance, in several provinces, based on the findings from the World Bank, we can see that the employers, they really would like to have more laborers for the newly open plants, newly open industries. But unfortunately, only few apply, merely because the prospective laborers, the prospective workers cannot go far, because they are still longing for the hometown. So it is also a context that might not happen in China, for instance, or other industrial countries. And also about soft skill, we can talk more about soft skill, the discipline, the work ethics, and all that. I think this also relates much with the culture, with the upbringing, the family, and others. I think it's interesting, Pak. Yes, I agree. I am really looking forward, Pak, for our collaboration, cooperation, also with Pak Dewa and others who are already expert in this issue.
Definitely, yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Pak.
thank you.
Thank you, Mas Adiatma and Mas Darendra. Any other comment, questions for Mas Darendra and Trim? Yeah, probably just a little bit. I cannot resist myself not to commenting on demographic bonus and related issues, because I think that's why when I ask about the quantity and the quality, and your questions actually in the poll very relevant to this. I think we are already spending too much time, taking for granted that bonus, demographic bonus or demographic dividends is merely manna from heaven. Like, oh, it's already happening and now we have it. But we forgot how to reap it, how to reap it, how to take advantage of it. And in order to be able to take advantage of this dividend, we need to be more productive. We need to be more innovative on utilizing this potential, right? That's why Mbak Ririn actually this morning also raising about that, the term opportunity. It's not something happening as it is, right? We need to do something to be able to get the bonus. So I think, yeah, that's the interesting part about this bonus. And the last thing that I would like to comment, actually, the problem with the population structures and these dividend related issues is that it's happening very slow. It's happening very slow. Even though now we are trying to focusing on the quality of the human capital, for example, and putting people into training and put them into school, it still requires sometimes to be able for them to graduate, for example, right? And then to gain skills. So it's not, we don't have the technology yet to be able to plug in more knowledge into their head, and in the next seconds, in the next minutes, people will be able to do more than that. But again, yeah, it's an interesting topic. Happy to see that. My last invitation or comment, questions from the participants, other colleagues, to Mas Darendra and team.
So yeah, Pak Dewa, can I just?
Yes, please, Pak Dewa.
Yeah, I actually treat this exercise, our simple exercise, as a trigger for those who are really into this, or like you, Pak Dewa, and colleagues from LD and Pak Adiatma and others, to see whether our exercise is really convincing. Is it true that the quality issues is still there, and are there any context that we need to see, or as a checks whether the demographic dividend, which is often associated with advantage, is true. So yes, that's why we just limit the dimensions of development only in 3 variables, although I believe there are so many contexts need to be related with this the advantage, what we call it advantage. Yes, I think so. I would like to invite, if not challenge, all of you to develop, to add more methods, to add more variables, context, and all that, to see whether our findings is convincing, is good enough. So thank you again, Pak Dewa, for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Mas Darendra. And again, congratulations for this work. And yes, on behalf of LD, I would like to see further and, of course, open for the collaborations and extending the research. Yeah. So maybe we can close Mas Darendra's presentation, and I would like to invite a big applause for the presentation. Thank you very much. And
thanks, Pak.
We shall move on to the next presentation. I would like to invite Mbak Maria Gayatri and Mbak Desi Nuri Fajar Ningtyas from BKKBN Indonesia. The title of the presentation is Unmet Need for Contraception Among Young Women in Indonesia, Insight from Indonesia Demographic and Health Survey, DHS. And the time is yours, Mbak Maria. Please.
Thank you, Bapak Moderator. Good morning, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Thank you for the opportunity to present this kind of secondary research based on the latest data of Indonesian Demographic and Health Survey. May I share my screen? Okay, thank you, Bapak Moderator. Can you see my screen? Is it clearly?
The slideshow, yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bapak Ibu sekalian. For the third study, after the first and the second, this is about the unmet need for contraception among young women in Indonesia. This is the secondary data analysis based on the data in 2017 IDHS. This is analyzed by myself and also Desi as my co-author from BKKBN. And then what is unmet need for family planning? So unmet need for family planning is defined as the percentage of pregnant women who exposed to the risk of pregnancy and they want to space that their pregnancy or they do not want any more children, but in the reality, they are not currently using any contraceptive methods, either modern or traditional methods. And then this unmet need still becomes a public health issue. And then women with unmet needs show the gap between their fertility preferences. It means that they want to space or limit the pregnancy, and the gap in women's actual reproductive behavior. Even though they want to space or limit their pregnancy, but in the reality, they do not use any contraceptive methods or any birth control methods. However, this indicator of unmet need for family planning nowadays, until today, still become a key indicator in family planning monitoring and evaluation. And then the fact about the young woman, in developing countries, young women aged 15 until 19 years old will have about 21 million pregnancy. But among those pregnancy, about half end in abortion and often an unsafe abortion. And then pregnancy among adolescent women have many negative impacts in maternal and child health, and then adverse health impact, social and educational, and also economic consequences of early pregnancy for adolescents. And then based on the fact that approximately 38 million young women in developing countries are sexually active, but they do not want a child, even spacing or limiting. Among those young women, only 40% are using modern contraceptive methods. And then from this fact, the objective of this research is to investigate the unmet need for contraception and the relationships with the demographic and socioeconomic factors among married young women aged 15 until 24 years who live in Indonesia. And then this is the sample selection because this is a secondary data analysis. We have some inclusion and also exclusion criteria. This is the sample we take, about 4,017 samples. Among 4,017 samples, there are only 376 young women with unmet need. These women are pregnant or amenorrheic women. but in the last pregnancy, they did not want the current pregnancy, and then they want current pregnancy later within 2 years. And then plus those women who currently at the time of the survey, they did not use any contraceptive methods, even though for spacing reasons or for limiting reasons. So based on 4 criteria for the unmet need among young women, we only collect 376 women with unmet need. This is the methodology. We use the individual woman record, the woman's individual records in IDHS, and then the samples is 4,016 married women, and then the outcome is unmet need among young women, unmet need including unmet need for spacing and also unmet need for limiting. And then some predictors in this analysis is like number of living children, woman's age, marital status, education, wealth, occupation, residence, and the questions about the decision making. And then the analysis is about, we use logistic regression, but adjusted with complex sample because of the design study of IDHS. And then this is the results, the factors affecting unmet need for family planning among young women in Indonesia. The first one, the majority of participants were currently married women. Among young women, there are 94% who currently married, and only about 6% of women are in union or cohabiting women. And then they had one or less children because they are still young. They only have one or nulliparous women. And then from the age, majority are 20 until 24 years, and they attend secondary educational level. Related to their occupation, about a half of the respondents were unemployed and living in poor conditions, and 60% of the respondents lived in rural area. It is probably because in urban areas, there are many young women, but in that age, they are not married yet because they are still continue their study until they graduate for the bachelor degree. And then this table is the results about the determinants of unmet need among young women. The unmet need for family planning or for modern contraception among young married women, it's about 9.3%. This is still lower if we compare to unmet need for reproductive women, that the prevalence of unmet need for reproductive women is about 10.6% in Indonesia. And then unmet need was higher among women who had higher number of children, and then among those who are not currently married yet or still in cohabiting women, and then those who live in rural area, and women whose husband want more children. So if young women have husband that the husband still still wants more children, so they have higher risk to get to be unmet need women. And then for unmet need for young women, the contraceptive prevalence rate is about 57%, and then the unmet need is about 9.3%. The unmet need among young women remain high because they have not met their fertility goals. They still want to have more children because they are still young. But this is a little bit, we must take a consideration for this issue because young women they have longer period to change their desired fertility. So the unmet need for family planning among young women I mean, the government should be put a special attention for this kind of group for young women. And then some barriers for young women to use contraceptive is like a fear of the side effects, especially about the infertility impact of following contraceptive discontinuation, and then lack of information among young women and misconception on the reassumption of the contraceptive methods. And then it is important to ensuring access for modern contraceptive services and information among young women is crucial to reduce the risk of unintended pregnancy. And then how to deal with this one? We must minimize the missed opportunities, especially those who, especially those women after delivery, by integrating contraceptive services, postpartum family planning program to maternal and health services. Like we want to integrate the postpartum family planning with the immunization program or with postnatal program for a mother after delivery. And then comprehensive counseling for informed consent is also urgently needed. Multiparity women had higher demand for contraception, and involving husband in the family planning counseling may be a strategy to reduce unmet need, especially it's about the special communication about family planning between husband and wife. Some recommendation for the first one is strengthen the education, information, and communication program, and also massive campaign, especially through social media or internet for high-tech young women. So it's so important to improve the campaign, especially for BKKBN through the social media. The second one, comprehensive counseling is also need to strengthen, and then increasing access to family planning information and services, and promoting ideal age of marriage. But if a young woman married in young age, so they can delay their first pregnancy. And then integrating postpartum family planning program to maternal and health services. The conclusion of this research is unmet need for contraception is a crucial issue, but is preventable with contraception. So increasing access to family planning information and services with integrated with maternal and child health care are urgently needed. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much, Bapak Moderator, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mbak Maria, for the presentation. Well done. Now, I would like to invite comment or questions to Mbak Maria. Is there any comment, questions from participants or colleague here? Oh, Mas Adiatma, raise hand.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Dewa.
Please,
Yes,
silakan.
so,
No worries.
yeah, Ibu Maria, it's yeah, again, it is very much in line, yeah, with the breastfeeding, especially at the end of the presentation when you said, we need to make a regulation regarding the age, yeah, of getting married, and then also the time between birth as well, yeah, because it very much relate with the success of breastfeeding, right? I mean, if you have children in a very short period of giving birth, then well, breastfeeding is out of the window, right? It's over, yeah. So, and then you also mentioned about the role of husband, yeah, which is very important in terms of maternal decision, right? I mean, like using contraception, giving breastfeeding. Husband's role is really central in our culture, yeah. So now the thing this is something that's always come around, yeah, in our study as well. So, from your perspective, how should we approach this part, yeah? Because this is a really personal issues, yeah. I mean, whatever policy that we design for this, is really, it really needs to aim at the micro level and at the personal level. So it's a bit tricky. That's what I'm saying. It's a bit tricky, but we need it. Yeah. So what's your view on this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak, for the question. For the first one, I would like to respond about the breastfeeding. The breastfeeding actually is one kind of modern contraceptive methods in in contraceptive studies. So breastfeeding is important, especially for young women. After their delivery, they must give the early initiation of breastfeeding or inisiasi menyusui, then continue to exclusive breastfeeding. So in the first 6 months, they have a higher opportunity to prevent themselves from the unintended pregnancy only by the breastfeeding. So that's the important thing of breastfeeding in family planning program, Pak. That's the first one. And then the second one, you mentioned about a short birth interval. So short birth interval is also important to, it's also important to reduce the risk of stunting among the children. And one of the, one way to make to longer the birth interval is also with breastfeeding, Pak. So after 6 months, they can use additional with modern contraceptive methods. That's my response about the breastfeeding. So breastfeeding is important to reduce the unmet need also. And then for second one, how to involve the husband, especially this is related to young women. Young women, women who married in young age, usually they have a poor condition, like they are poor, they are lack of information, they're less educated. That's the characteristic of women who married in young age. And then to involve the husband, the first one is the health provider in the program of antenatal care. So when young mothers come to health facilities and get the antenatal care counseling, they can involve their husband from the antenatal care. So in the antenatal care, the providers can, share the information and also convince the father that this woman after delivery need to do breastfeeding, and also additionally with use contraceptive methods that safe for breastfeed mothers. For example, we have a POP or a progesterone pill only that match for the breastfeed mothers, or the mothers can use hormonal non-hormonal contraception while breastfeeding. That's the first one. And then the second one, except from the counseling from health providers, we can make like husband peers. So like a groups for husband in young women. They can have some communication among husbands to support their wives, that decision about family planning, including breastfeeding and also maternal and child health, should be discussed together between husband and wife. Husband must understand what is the needs of their wife's health and also the needs for their newborn health. So that's how we involving husband in the family planning program, especially for young women. So through the counseling from the health providers.
Okay. Thank you, Bu Maria. That's very interesting. So husband counseling group, yeah? So that's interesting. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mas Adiat. There is the second question from Mbak Rita, BKF. Please unmute first.
Thank you. Pak Dewa. Bu Maria, thank you for the presentation. But I have one question for you. Do you think that PKH program from government can optimize and solve this unmet contraceptive problem? I mean, what do you think about that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bu. PKH is program Keluarga Harapan. Is that you mean about PKH?
Yes,
Okay.
that program.
Okay, okay. I think PKH can also help BKKBN to solve the unmet need problem, especially from young women. We can do like this one for the PKH. There are some session or like in the campaign or communication between field worker to the household. So I mean like the field worker visited the household and then they give more information about the benefits of the family planning program to maternal and child health. For example, if the household that visited by field workers who are cadres who manage the PKH program, if the households in a poor condition or they have some limitation to adopt the family planning program, so the cadres or the field workers can now inform the household to go to health facilities because some of family planning programs are paid by the government, so it's free from them. So that's the contribution of PKH to help BKKBN to solve the unmet needs. So by the information, to inform more and more and more, especially for disadvantaged households, to convince this household that the importance of family planning, about the importance of family planning for their health, and then for their and also for their well-being, not only for health but also the well-being of the family. So that's how the collaboration of PKH and also the family planning program, Bu. Thank you so much, Bu.
Can I make a further question, Pak Dewa?
Yes, please, Bu. Okay. Yes, so, please.
Do you think, Bu Maria, we government can put like one conditional to the PKH program to include about the family planning? So PKH is conditional cash transfer, so they get when they meet the conditional terms. So what do you think about that? Or just like giving information also? So
I think just for giving information, why I only suggest information because the cost of services has paid by government, Bu. For example, for the health providers under the BPJS, and for the contraceptive methods is under the government, the BKKBN budget. So we can use it, like only for the information, and maybe if you want to help us, the cadre and also the field workers can also inform how to get the nutritional food for the for the household. Why I say like that? Because stunting nowadays have become one of the main goals of BKKBN. So we not only about contraceptive methods, but nowadays BKKBN is also about stunting, how to reduce stunting. So with PKH, you can do like some approach to the household, how to improve their nutritional status, and how they can prepare or they can avoid they can prepare or they can menyediakan, I'm sorry, I forget, menyediakan some food, some local food. Some local food, so it's not expensive from the local food. For example, in some areas there are some fish from some fish, so they can use that fish, that how to repackage that fish, how to cook that fish, and it become more nutrition. It become more. It can increase the nutritional status of the households, and maybe from the, repackage the food, they can sell the food, so it will improve also their economical status for the household, especially in this pandemic. And also one thing, I think it's also innovative if you give the program of how to manage the distribution of food, kind of food. For example, you use the PKH program for food, but you can give the additional program to how to distribute the food, so it can improve the economical status of the household. Thank you, Ibu and Bapak.
Okay, thank you, Bu Maria, for your explanation.
Thank you, Mbak Rita, for the questions. Very intriguing, yeah, to relate the issue of contraceptive use and the PKH program, yeah, particularly for the poor family in this case, I guess. Any other questions, comment on the topic for Mbak Maria? Maybe I would like to share a little bit comment, maybe, yeah, Mbak Maria. Like the study actually quite interesting because it's supposedly already beyond the classical demand versus supply of the contraceptions approach, yeah. And at the end, you also mentioned about the confounding factors. One of them actually related with Mas Adiatma presentation before about the breastfeeding. You also mentioned about the birth spacing, and Mbak Rita's adding up more aspects on relation to the policy for the family, poor family program, for example. So I think one way to enhance the result of this study a little bit, just to explain more systematically about these confounding factors, as I mentioned. So it will be beyond the supply and demand aspect. For example, in the recommendation you mentioned about the education, information, and so on, which is classical actually related to the supply side, right? I think we need more beyond that. You mentioned about the involvement of husband. I think I missed the econometric part, the logistic regression part. How far actually you elaborate the variable of husbands? Because I believe you already mentioned about that. The role of husband is very important now. Previously in the past, the contraception or family planning mostly on the burden of women's participation, right? So like everybody focusing on the women, but male participation somehow left behind, or nobody actually interested to elaborate further. The classical approach usually only on male participation on using contraception. But your funding, right? I'm using contraception actually. Because I'm the one who choose the long-term contraception. But again, this aspect actually not much being elaborated further, right? How the husband's role. You mentioned about the information, the birth spacing, and so on. Husbands need to be involved in this particular program. I think that will be great if we are able to elaborate further. And I guess the analysis on unmet need for the contraceptions need to, more focusing on how male or husband's role in this particular case. That will be interesting because then we can justify that it takes two to tango. It's not only female part that has to use contraception enable to make this family planning program successful and increase the welfare of the family. I think that's also the campaign we need to elaborate further. Really interesting.
Thank you. Become the vasectomy users. Say that long term, so it means vasectomy users. Thank you so much. So I think that's a good suggestion to improve this manuscript or this article. So in this article, the husband involvement in family planning program, not only husband become the users, but also how husband can support their wife and then can discuss nicely with their wife to decide which methods of contraceptive that match to their fertility goals. So example for you, you want to limit your childbearing. So you directly use the sterilization method. So it's more safe, and also cost effective, because only one you did it, and it will be protect your wife and also yourself from the risk of unintended pregnancy. Thank you so much, Pak.
Thank you, thank you. So, once again, I would like to call comment questions to this topic. Any other comment questions? So I'm very happy to see this presentation today from the breastfeeding, participation, and the demographic bonus with the very massive cluster on how to identify this bonus potentially to be gained. And yeah, demography or population analysis usually not much very interesting for many people, but it's so interesting, like even our colleague from BKF interested with this. Any comment, questions? So if there is no more questions or comment, I think I would like to invite all participants here to send a big applause to Mbak Maria and her team in BKKBN for a very fascinating presentation. Well done. And for as a moderator for this session, I would like to thank you everyone, colleagues, for the participation. Great presentation for the three of you. And thank you for the committee for having this event, yeah. And looking forward to see in another session or collaborate further for the topic. Okay, I guess that's all from me. Thank you again for having me here, and have a nice day. Have a very pleasant discussion in ISA.